I'm going to warn the XRP holders out there. If you read this decision, when you get to page 8, you're going to shake your head.
In today's video, Attorney John Deaton discussed the latest with the SEC and what's next for the procedural process.
Good day for crypto. Obviously, Bitcoin's up, the altcoins are up, but that's not the point. The point to celebrate today is that the law won. A lot of us have been fighting in this crypto fight for a long time, right? Me, the 75,000 XRP holders that joined. We were trying to encourage others to join a while ago. I'm going to show you a tweet I put out a long time ago. And it's a tweet where I talked about this spot Bitcoin ETF, okay? And how somebody should sue because of these denials. And I tagged, let's see, Scaramucci, Kathy Wood, Anthony Papliano, and was basically saying, listen, this is absurd. This is a capricious, arbitrary and capricious. And it wasn't me who was just saying it, but it was Joseph Grunfest who was out there saying it. And that was before Grayscale even decided to file suit. And let's talk real quick why. Why is there such a hesitation to go after your regulator? I understand it. Kevin O'Leary's, remember when Brian Armstrong tweeted out his frustration? He couldn't get a meeting with Gensler and that the SEC wasn't talking to crypto companies and all of that. And Brian Armstrong just said, hey, listen, this is what's going on. And Kevin O'Leary was like, that's stupid. You don't highlight yourself against the regulator, blah, blah, blah. We can't bow down to these guys, right? Gary Gensler is a transient regulator. Inflation may not be transient, but Gary Gensler is. Okay, he's not going to be there more than another year, most likely. And there'll be someone else. So when these unelected bureaucrats get power, just because they say something doesn't make it right. Bill Hinman testified under oath that you do not need to satisfy all the Howey factors in order for an investment contract transaction to occur. That's obscene. It's not true. That's not the law. Yet he testified under oath that it was. These people are not God. All right. They're not even elected officials. They're bureaucrats who get picked for reasons not because of their competency or because of their knowledge. Okay, but anyways, and so there was a fight. Let's talk about why, we got here. I want to show my prediction first. I made a prediction about this before where I said I predicted this win. And a lot of people didn't, and we're going to talk about why, because of the high standard. But let's first talk about how we got here, right? And we had this first phase. The first phase was that SEC rejects the Gray Trust, their flagship product, the Bitcoin Trust, GBTC, which was an ETP, not an ETF. They wanted to convert it to a spot Bitcoin ETF. And futures ETFs were already granted. So conventional wisdom was that a spot ETF would be granted. Now understand, if you don't grant a spot Bitcoin ETF, who does that exclude? That excludes the majority of the people watching this. Otherwise, if you have a Schwab account, like I own GPTC and I have for a long time, but I'm an accredited investor. I wasn't an accredited investor until recently. All right. So up until my 40s, I wasn't an accredited investor. And so I would have been kept out of this. Most people are kept out from owning an ETF, but accredited investors could. A futures ETF is for who? Professional traders who are trading the futures market, right? And so basically, they applied, and in June of 2022, the SEC rejected the GPTC to be converged into an ETF. Now, what was the reason of the denial? The reason of the denial was some standard language that the SEC kept applying. spot ETF after the other. The Winklevi twins, other people had submitted for the spot Bitcoin ETFs, and it kept getting denial because the application did not meet the anti-fraud and investor protection standards. I mean, that's basically, in essence, why they said they were denying it. Remember, the SEC claims that everything they do is to protect us, right? They brought the Ripple case to protect XRP holders. They brought the library case to protect LBC holders. They brought the Coinbase lawsuit to protect Coinbase customers. The denial of the GPTC trust, they claimed, was to protect investors from fraud. So unless you're an accredited investor, unless you're a professional trader who's engaging in the futures market, you don't get to own a spot ETF. All right. But what was the SEC approving? They approved a futures ETF. They approved a short Bitcoin ETF, and they then approved a 2-time leveraged Bitcoin futures ETF. So all of the professional traders, all of the hedge funds, they could engage in Bitcoin futures, short, even using leverage. But the regular guy, they can't own a Bitcoin ETF in America. So basically, that's where we got. Now, Grayscale finally decided to fight back. Crypto fought back. I gotta believe it's because they saw what was happening in the Ripple case, and that everything they were saying about XRP was going to be applied to all the other altcoins. The SEC was just digging their heels in the sand and going all out anti-crypto. Choke point 2.0 with the banks. And finally, it was like, we have to fight back. Now, remember, the law and the courts are supposed to be the check. When we have an out of control regulator, the only check on that regulator is the court system. And that's why it's a good day, because I believed if we just follow the law, crypto will win. And so we get to phase 2 of why we're here today, and that is the Grayscale appeal. And the Grayscale appeal, basically, if we go to page 7 of the decision that came down today, you'll see and understand what's allowed. And here you see that it basically says, under the Administrative Procedure Act and the Exchange Act, that if someone is aggrieved by the commission and receives a final order, they can appeal to the district court, the Appeals Court District of Columbia, and they can go there. And the standard is that if the appellate court finds that the SEC's decision was arbitrary and capricious, right? That's the term of art, arbitrary and capricious, then it can vacate the SEC's decision and send it back for further review. And that's basically what happened. And that's why I said we got to get them in court and fight. Now, what is a arbitrary and capricious? It is a very high standard, very high standard. And that's why most of the attorneys, understandably, were predicting that the SEC would likely win. Because do you want to know how the SEC can defeat the arbitrary and capricious claim? They only have to do one thing, really. They only have to basically reasonably explain why they made the decision that they made. If the SEC can provide a coherent, reasonable explanation, then the SEC wins. What that means, everyone, is that even if the appellate judges disagree with the decision of the SEC, even if they think the SEC was using poor judgment in its decision, as long as the decision is one that can be reasonably explained in a coherent manner, then the SEC wins. And that's why you see so many people saying that it was a long shot to win this. But when you look at the SEC's conduct and you look at the underlying facts, I was confident that we would meet that standard. Grayscale would meet that standard, and they did, okay? Because the SEC did not have a reasonable explanation. Let's go to page 8. And I'm going to warn to the XRP holders out there, if you read this decision, when you get to page 8, you're going to shake your head, because it basically lays out that if you have two types of cases and there's different treatment of one case versus the other, then that can lead to challenging the decision. And I know a lot of you are going to think, oh my God, that applies to ETH was given a free pass, XRP's not. But this is when you have a decision from the SEC, like a ruling from the SEC, and not an enforcement action that's in the court system. Okay. But it lays out basically that when you have two similar scenarios, and here we have a futures Bitcoin ETF and a spot ETF, then there needs to be some consistency. And the SEC's decision needs to be explained if they're going to treat those very two similar products differently. And that's where we have. Now we get to phase 3, which is what we've been looking at, which is the decision that came down today, where, as predicted, Grayscale won. Big victory, big victory. The court very articulately hands the SEC its ass. That's the best way I can explain it. They basically tell the SEC that your explanation is incoherent and you have failed miserably to come up with a plausible, reasonable explanation as to why you would do this. Okay. And now there's confusion always. When there is some kind of ruling or decision, there's so much confusion. I've already seen it on Twitter, X, whatever. And that is, some people are saying that, that the court ordered that the GPTC be converted to a spot Bitcoin ETF. And that is not what happened. What happened is the SEC's ruling was reversed, and it's basically like remanded back to the SEC, and now they can't rely on their denial based on the reasoning that they gave, because their reasoning is flawed, it's unreasonable, it's incoherent. So what they can do is the following. They can look at it, accept the fact that, as the court said, there was a 99.9 correlation between the futures ETF price and the spot Bitcoin price, and that the same arguments related to preventing fraud and manipulation, they 100% or 99.9%, I should say, equally apply to the spot ETF that applies to the futures ETF. And so the SEC can't just rely on their denial on that basis. So the SEC can reevaluate it, take their time, right? Reevaluate it and deny the spot ETF on a different basis. And then that would be challenged again. That's one option. Another option is the SEC could appeal in 45 days or within 45 days, appeal this decision, which was 3-0. It was a 3-member appellate panel. They could appeal it to the full court, which is like 13 judges. Okay, it's 11 or 13. I can't remember off the top of my head, to be honest. And now, I don't think that's likely, because this was 3-0. If the decision had been 2-1, then you could say, oh, look, this was a split decision, and therefore we have people on that appellate court that'll be similar, and maybe we should appeal it. But the way the SEC got smacked down, I don't see them doing that. And then, of course, another option is what a lot of people believe is going to happen, and that is that the SEC is going to accept this defeat and try to spin it in a political way somehow and grant Bitcoin spot ETFs. Here's where we're going to find out how much entrenched in the anti-crypto agenda Gensler is, because they took a hit, obviously, with the Ripple case. They've taken a hit in every courtroom, just about every time they're before a judge. Okay. And so it's a massive win. Gensler can obviously delay and just, that's his goal. Delay. We're going to revisit this. Or he could grant the spot ETFs. I'm inclined not to think he's going to do that. The only thing that makes me think he might see, sort of the light, if you will, finally, is that you have the Larry Finks of the world who carry a lot of influence. And you see now there's going to be more Democrats who are going to be amenable to, okay, well, crypto's not all about fraudsters, hucksters, and scammers, like you say. I mean, you're losing every single time in court, Gensler. I mean, maybe you need to hail back some of this. There's a tweet from the Wolf of Wall Street, Scott, right? I also like to quote my favorite author in crypto, Dr. Rosalind Layton, who says the SEC chose to fight the law and the law won. And so, we're going to get a spot Bitcoin ETF. There's no doubt about that. That is a guarantee. It's just a question of, is it going to be Friday like some people are predicting? I doubt it, but it's possible. If it's not Friday, then you're probably looking at, by the end of the year, I would imagine October, November, unless the SEC chooses to appeal. If they choose to appeal, then you're not getting a spot ETF this year, and it would be in the first or second quarter of next year. So I don't know. I can't really predict. I tell you this, I don't have a very high opinion of Gary Gensler, as many of you know. So I don't, what they do in the Ripple case, they blame the judge. The judge got it wrong. Judge Torres misunderstood the law, whatever. Are they going to say the same thing here? Or, so it really depends what's happening behind the scenes. If Gensler is smart, right, with only maybe a year and a half left as chair of the SEC, in my opinion, does he want to go down in history as the worst SEC chairman, where all he was done was embarrassed in court? Or is he going to reach out to the Financial Services Committee and try to come up with some kind of legislation and clarity that he can live with? And so now, listen, here's the other thing. There's always, I don't think it's going to happen, but Gensler could put his middle finger up and say they're going to rescind the futures ETF. So now there's no comparison. You can't be arbitrary and capricious, but that would piss off the Wall Streeters who are his friends, who have his cell phone. So I don't think that's going to happen, but there has been talk about that as well. But understand, that doesn't mean that tomorrow there is a spot Bitcoin ETF. We have to wait and see the true reaction from the SEC. My final thoughts are simply, it's a good day. I got to tell you, I made the prediction because I put faith in the law. I've been wrong about some things, no doubt, but the two major predictions, I put my faith that Judge Torres would do the right thing, even if she held Ripple accountable for some sales in the early sales, that she would say XRP is not a security. She would address the secondary market and she would find in our favor XRP holders. And she did that. She followed the law, applied it fairly, impartially, without passion or prejudice. And we got the result that we should. And then I had faith that if someone challenged the SEC and fought back, that the law would win. And the law won.